Okay,
just want to make sure you're on there.
Yeah, I was just setting up the recording. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. Our topic today is phone training that will help your practice succeed. Appreciate everybody tuning in today. A little bit about OptiCall, if you guys aren't familiar. We started in business about 11 years ago. Our focus has been around the inbound call handling, specializing in converting new leads to consults. We offer a training program called ACE, where we record real calls and work with the staff to improve their outcomes. We also have an outbound patient reactivation program called Boomerang, where we schedule patients that are overdue for care back into the practice. And we recently started offering online chat. Here's a picture of myself. In a second, I'm about to, well, not just myself, but our team. There's our Vice President, Ed Cushing, myself, Dylan Kemna, Liz Henderson, one of our account managers, and our President, Bill Mercier, is going to be joining us on the call today. But a little bit about why we're qualified. We've taken over 2 million patient phone calls. We've worked with over 300 practices across the country. And because we get to see what's happening from so many different practices, we bring some good perspective of what's happening on the front lines. And today we're just trying to educate everyone on how to improve their phone handling process. So without further ado, I'll introduce Bill Mercier, our president. Bill, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming on the phone today. We really appreciate your time. And some of the things that we are going to cover today are, Dylan, you can go to the next slide there. We're going to go over some of the current trends and challenges. Whoops.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you hit that hot corner in your Mac. We're going to go over some of the current trends and challenges for today's practices. One of the most important pieces of the entire puzzle, I think, when we talk about the whole phone call process is customer service. And I want to make sure everybody on the phone call today understands how big a piece customer service plays in the phone call process and how that sounds and feels to the incoming caller too. We want to create a phone plan with a customer service mindset. And we're going to talk exactly about how to do that. And then we also want to talk about some of the steps that we at OptiCall do during our own training and hiring process to help you understand what we go through. Our company has been in an evolution over the past 11 years. We didn't start out doing exactly what we do today. We learned from the experience of taking over 2 million phone calls what works and what doesn't work. So some of the concepts that we're going to talk to you about today, what we're hoping that you can do is have an open mind enough to look at these and say, will these work for my practice? Some of them will, some of them may not. But we hope that you all walk away with some information and something to bring back to your practices that will help in your own hiring and training and phone flow process. So let's start with this as a first poll. Dylan, I'll let you run the poll here.
Yeah, it should be up right now. Can you see it on your screen?
Okay. I sure can.
Okay.
So who is the most important person in your practice? And we'd like you to mark, if you think the doctor is the one, they're the one that the patients are coming in to see, and without them, they wouldn't have a practice to begin with. Could it be your administrator? Because you can have a great doctor, but if you don't have an administrator that's basically running everything and overseeing everything and putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, without them, the practice may fall apart. We've got a patient coordinator who's somebody who's responsible for seeing the patients when they actually do come into the office. And without them, you wouldn't have any patients going through the consultation and converting over to procedures. Could it be your billing person? If you didn't have a billing person and they weren't collecting money, nobody would get a paycheck. Or the front desk. So let's take a look at
that. Like the majority of everybody has voted. I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll here. So
okay.
Close and share results. And I'm not sure, can you see, I think I see a different view as the moderator. But from what I'm looking at, we've got 9% said the doctor, 6% administrator, 9% patient coordinator, 0 on the billing manager, and 75% of the people chose the front desk.
Great. Well, I definitely appreciate these answers, and I think what's becoming more and more apparent is that people are seeing the front desk as the most important piece. Now, I hope there are no billing managers on the phone call, because they're all important too. Every piece of this whole entire organization is critical to making it run. But here's the thing about the front desk. These are the people that are the very first impression that anybody is going to get, whether they walk into your office or whether they call you on the phone. The biggest challenges that we have is, number one, they receive the least amount of medical attention. In many of the offices that I actually go in and have an opportunity to visit, what happens is the trend is to take the call center off the front desk now and start to move them back into call centers. And you can hit the button there and bring up the next bullet point, Dylan. So what ends up happening is these folks that are handling these calls are putting cramped cubicles, out of sight, out of mind. They're in triage centers in separate buildings. A lot of times they don't even have windows to create a nice experience for them in their working environment. And I think a working environment is very, very important. They're expected to multitask. If this is the type of call center that has somebody at the front desk that's picking up the phones, they're usually doing a lot of different things and wearing multiple hats. So they're checking patients in, checking patients out. They're doing insurance work. They're ordering tests, all of these different things. Now, the problem is a lot of times these folks are just thrown right into the fire. And as soon as they're hired, they're expected to handle all of these duties. Yet they are also expected to be the very first impression of what that incoming caller or patient has of our practice. So let's go over a few pretty cool facts. Once I came across these and I saw them on websites and different newsletters, I thought they were really interesting. Last year, over 45% of consumers initiated a purchase over the phone. So they've made a phone call and they've bought something. Now, bring up the next bullet. Out of those callers, over 70% were put on hold. Now, I'm trying to build a picture here as to why customer service is such a critical piece to the whole phone call process. Over 70% put on hold. The average hold time was 57 seconds, so about a minute. And the average business executive, and for those of us who know that, and we're all probably at work today, the average person is placed on hold for about 15 minutes per day in their process of making phone calls. So there are some challenges with regards to the whole customer service picture here. Some more fun facts. Last year, over 94% of most marketing budgets were spent on persuading that customer to make the phone call. Pick up the phone, make a call, and make an inquiry about your product or service. Only 6% of those marketing budgets were actually spent on handling that customer's call. So you can see a big difference between what we spend to make the phone ring, but how much time and attention and resources are we allocating to making sure we're doing the right job once the phone does ring? And it has a huge impact. Let's go on to the next slide there. And 34% of the callers who call through to a practice and do not get the results or are placed on hold or on hold for too long or whatever happens, and they end up hanging up on that phone call, they will not call back. And that's a huge, huge issue. So let's go on to the next poll here, Dylan. I'll let you run this one.
Okay. So I'll have it up in just a second here. So the question is, why 45% of most consumers, why do they not book at the first place that they call? I'll leave this up for a little bit so we can get some responses from our audience. But the options that we have available are price, fear, timing, need more information, or poor customer service. And I feel like some of the people in the presentation may know a little bit about OptiCall if they're answering correctly.
It's either they've heard me speak or have seen me at one of the shows or something like that, or we just have a very sharp audience, which is, I know we have a lot of great practices on with us today.
Yeah, we're excited about the attendance today. We actually have an international presence, and we've got people from many different verticals. So, we appreciate it here at OptiCall. I'll go ahead and launch the results of the poll.
Fantastic.
I don't know if you can see it.
Like.
We got 5% on price, 3% on fear, 5% timing, 10% need more information, and 78% poor customer service.
So here's the really neat thing that I see about with the way that people are responding here, Dylan, is that people are in tune with customer service being an issue. We know it's a problem. The question is, how do we address this? And we're going to get into that a little bit further when we get into the presentation, into the meat of it. But if you take a look at 45% of the people who do not book at the very first practice that they call, here's the contributing factors. Number one, they felt like they were on hold for too long. We talked a little bit about the average person being on hold for 15 minutes during their business day, and that the average hold time was about a minute. Well, in many practices that we've called through to, and we do a lot of mystery shopping, we hear it actually a lot longer than that. We've been placed on hold for 3 or 4 minutes before we can get a live person. They had to repeat information to multiple people. So, and we all know how frustrating that is. If you are making a phone call, and it doesn't matter who you're calling, and you lay out your whole story and what it is that you need help with, and you just so happen to hit the wrong department, and you have to be transferred off to somebody else, you have to lay out your whole story again. And it's very aggravating. It's one of those things that frustrates people when they call through. They felt like the representative was not knowledgeable enough or could not solve their problems. One of the biggest trends that I see in call centers today is that when a patient calls in, they're armed and dangerous with questions. They have questions about price or procedure or process or whatever it may be. And what ends up happening at the practice side is the person that's sitting at the front desk feels like if they just simply answer those questions to the best of their ability and let the caller off the phone, they've done their job. Well, that's not the job that we're here for. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the structure of a phone call. But we're here to really engage with callers and create an experience. And the problem is so much research done on these procedures today from the patient side that they call up and they know more than a lot of the front desk call centers at the call center do. So, and responses to patients' messages and emails were too slow. If you can respond to a message within the first 5 or 10 minutes, the chances of converting that patient into a consultation are 100 times better than waiting an hour or two. It's incredible the difference between them. A lot of these stats we pulled out of an MIT study that was done, and then a follow-up study that was done just last year on that, and it was all about the response times and what are the best times of day, and a whole bunch of statistics that are really cool. So what I would suggest is that at the end of this presentation, Dylan will have both mine and his contact information. If you'd like us to pass on those studies, we'd be more than happy to do that. Just get in touch with us, and we'll make sure that we can email them out to you. Well, let's move on to the next slide here. So here's what we see. And we have a lot of practices that we work with. We are currently working with about 110 practices. We've worked with literally hundreds over the last 11 years in being in business. So we've had an opportunity to listen to a lot of patient phone calls, visit a lot of call centers, and see what's going on there. And here are some of the reasons why there is control lost at the phone. Sometimes we just have the wrong people answering the phones, and I'm sure as anybody on this phone call can attest, you've all called some place where somebody picks up on the phone and you can just tell that that person is not smiling. You know that they are having a bad day, or perhaps you get attitude or tone on the other end of the phone when you're asking your initial questions, and it's just the wrong person answering the phone. They should not be in a position of customer service relations. Sometimes there's improper training or no training at all. I have been in call centers and have done trainings in front of the entire staff where there have been people there that are answering their phones that just got hired 2 days earlier. There's so much information that you need to know about the different procedures that you perform, about the process, the doctors, the location, the different appointment types that you book, that we can't just throw our people in the fire and expect them to do a stellar customer service job. It's just impossible to do that. You need the proper training in place. A lot of times phone staff are multitasking. They're expected to do different things. And when we have, and I'm sure we've all done this because I am guilty of it. If I'm on a phone call and I've got my emails up in front of me and somebody emails me and I'm supposed to be paying attention to the phone call I'm on, all of a sudden I'm reading my email and somebody asks me a question. I just completely didn't even hear them. I missed their point, and I have to ask them over again. And multitasking is not an easy thing to do, and be able to pay attention to the person that is on the phone, who is the most important one. And then staff turnover. It's hard to get good people in place and keep them in place. And we're going to talk about what we do in OptiCall to do that. So let's move on to the next slide.
Bill, I wanted to announce a little housekeeping. It looks like we've actually reached our max attendance, which is kind of a milestone here for OptiCall. So we appreciate everyone that did get their spot on today's presentation, and those that weren't able to tune in. We're going to be recording today's event, and we'll be distributing the link after the presentation. Sorry to take you out of your flow there.
Not at all. No problem at all. So I think the important thing is to understand the practice and the staff, the entire team, have to have a certain approach to the entire process of bringing patients through. It starts with the phone, and it follows all the way through the front desk, and it follows through to the examination lanes, and it follows through to the procedure and what happens after the procedure, and then the post-op process too. It's all about creating an experience for that patient, because our grand goal is to have them bring back their friends and family. So if we talk about that, let's move on to the next slide there, Dylan. This is something that I've found is incredibly important. It doesn't matter what business you're in. You could be selling cookies or ice cream or medical procedures or whatever it is. If you're going to be successful in business, the three things that you absolutely need, and number one, is an excellent product. Now, I know the people on the phone today have excellent products or services. So if it's a medical procedure, it's an excellent product, and those products get better and better over time through evolution and through technology. They just become better. The second thing that you need is you need to have an excellent delivery system. That's the way that you get that product to the end consumer. It's your office, it's your advertising, it's the whole process of bringing somebody through the entire process of inquiring to having the procedure done. And it includes where your practice is located. And the problem is a ton of money that's spent on products. There's a ton of money that's spent on delivery systems and real estate and all of those things. And probably the most neglected piece of this, which is actually the most important, is you need to have an excellent customer service mindset. And the entire organization needs to have this. Now, the real difference between the excellent product and excellent delivery system versus the customer service piece of it is people. When you have people, you have thinking, you have brains and hearts, you have people that can think and proactively approach a situation and make it better. So that's why it's really important to have an excellent customer service mindset and think ahead or approach a particular situation with, how do I get the best results out of this? So let's talk about creating an effective phone plan and what needs to happen if we're looking to create this entire process with that customer service mindset in mind. It starts with having the right people on the bus. And when we talk about having the right people on the bus, it's about making sure that you're hiring the right people and putting them in place. It's creating a culture within your organization that makes people feel happy about being there, wanting to participate in the process, and wanting to do the right job each and every time they get a telephone call or they meet with a patient. And so the second piece of that is creating the right scripting or process of the phone call with that customer service mindset in mind as well. And we're going to talk about both of these a little bit more specifically. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to hire the right people. I think one of the most important things when you're thinking about hiring the right people is not necessarily trying to find somebody in that industry that has the technical knowledge behind it. Because I can tell you that I've met people that were tremendously talented in the customer service end, that we can teach the technical piece of it. And then I've met people who are tremendously talented in the technical side of it, but they don't have the customer service piece of it. And you can't teach customer service like you can teach technology. Customer service and that whole idea of wanting to do a better job for that person a lot of times is something that is inherent in our personalities. So one of the most important things is you want to hire for the right demeanor. You want to have somebody that wants to be there, that's a happy person. Second thing is you want to find people that are willing, able, and committed. One of my good friends at Care Credit, Mark Babbitt, if anybody on the phone knows him, puts on a presentation. He talks about the concept of being willing, able, and committed. And that's somebody who really has buy-in and who really wants to be there to do the right job. When we talk about the idea of phone voice, one of the things that we do at OptiCall, before we even bring somebody in for an interview, is we interview them on the phone so we can hear them, but then we actually email them a script. We give them a special phone number to call in, and we ask them to read that script to the recording, and we have that call recorded so that we can reference back to it before they're even invited in so that we can see if they're a good fit for our culture. We want to see what they sound like on the phone, and phone voices are critical. And there's a difference between a male voice and a female voice on the phone, too. Men tend to be, and I know this because I'm this way, a little bit more technical on the phone, where women tend to be a little bit more emotional. So there's understanding that difference between the genders as well. One of the other things that we like to do, too, once we have somebody in the office, is we like to paint customer service scenarios for them and do some role playing. We're not making these customer service scenarios up. What we're doing is we're taking real telephone calls that there have been, some sort of a situation on, whether it be good customer service or poor customer service or whatever it is, and allowing our newbies to come in and listen to those and waiting for them to respond as to how they would handle a situation like that. We're looking for proactive thinkers, not somebody who wants to go through the motions and just simply read a script and answer questions and just bring somebody in. We're looking for people that want to engage with the callers and create some rapport and create a relationship on the phone. That's one of the most important things that anybody can do when you're talking to a new or an existing patient, is to create that relationship, because that's what's going to keep that patient with you or entice them to come in, even if your price is more than your competitors. So if we take a look at where the best hires come from, a lot of the staff that we have on board actually have come from other staff members that we have on board already. Now, here's the interesting thing. Only 7% of job applicants come from referrals nationwide, but they make up 40% of the new hires. And this is in a day and age of all the job board postings, the internet, I don't know if anybody's old enough on the phone to remember this, but way back in the day, if you wanted a job, you went to the classified section in the newspaper and you looked around. And if there was something that enticed you, you made a phone call and maybe sent in a resume and hopefully got an interview. The process is so completely different today, but the best hires can actually come from people that you actually have within your organization. And we entice our staff to bring those people on. It's about including them in the entire process. If they have other friends that they work well with in our organization, then we know they're going to stay around as well. So retention rates after 3 years from people who have been referred in from another employee are 47% versus 14% for job board applicants. There's a huge difference. But here's the caveat to that. You need to consider the source who's referring that person in. The people who are A-type players, those are the ones that are usually hanging around with the other highly motivated, hardworking people. On the flip side of that, if you have people that are C players, they typically hang around with other C players. So make sure if you're considering hiring somebody within your organization that you bring somebody on that is a friend of an A player. So let's go on to the next slide here. New hires. Within our organization, there are a few things that we like them to do. One of the things that we think is important is we put them through a secret shopping process. Now, we do a tremendous amount of secret shopping for our vendors. Will ask us, hey, I've got a practice that I think can use your help. Would you mind doing a mystery shop for them and give me the results, and I'll see if I can get you a meeting with them or whatever it may be. And through that secret shopping, what we do a lot of times is we have our newer staff do that. Because if our newer staff do it, they can actually ask questions that they're curious about with the procedures and find out what it sounds like on the other end. When I started this company 11 years ago, prior to starting it, I was in the elective laser business up in New England. I had no clue what LASIK was about, what lasers were about, nothing. So the very first thing I did was I started a mystery shop. Not only on the phone, I did it in person. And it gave me an idea of what was happening at the practice level and how practices were handling things. So it's a great tool as you hire new people, too, to bring them in. And it allows them to see what's going on. And it also allows them to experience customer service at a practice level and see what we're trying to do different at OptiCall and how we try to enhance things. One of the other things that we like to do, Dylan, you can change the slide.
Well, I wanted to mention real quick regarding the mystery shop that we do have an offer at the end of today's presentation for those that fill out the survey, that there's an opportunity for a complimentary mystery shop through OptiCall that'll help you get a barometer on how well your staff is converting new leads to consults. I just wanted to mention that while we were talking about the mystery shop.
So here's one of the things that we do that we think is absolutely critical. Once we decide we're going to bring somebody on, and a lot of practices on the phone probably do this, but we do a tremendous amount of job shadowing. We have a manager on the phone, and what they do, and it's always one of our most experienced people that we put on the phone, and we put the new person on a training headset. And they are allowed to listen and follow through what questions come up so they can hear firsthand the conversation going back and forth. From there, we actually have a program that we created on our own for the phone scripting and data capture, and we allow them to watch and listen. Then they start to type in the information as we go through the process of asking different questions and interviewing the incoming caller, finding out more about them, and so on and so forth. Eventually, and when I say eventually, it takes about a month and a half to 2 months before we allow somebody to start to take their very first phone calls. We allow them to take a phone call, but it flip-flops where the manager is on the listening part and the new person is on the part of talking. And in this process, the new person will announce to the caller that they are new. And they do have a manager standing by. Is it okay if they take their phone call? And I can tell you, we've never had one person in all of the phone calls that we take over the course of the months and years and so on and so forth say, no, I don't want you to continue. I want the experienced person. And it works very well for us.
I think we've heard just the opposite, Bill. Didn't we receive a compliment recently for taking this?
Yes, we did. We absolutely did, yeah. We had one of our practices last week had actually sent the doctor an email saying, you know, she really appreciated that we did that and that they did a stellar job. And those are the things that we love to hear, especially if it's a newer person taking the phone calls. Hang on one second here, Dylan. My screen just went into sleep mode. There we go. Okay. All right. I'm back. All right. So I think one of the most important things that you can think of when you're talking about your own call centers, hiring and staffing and maintaining that call center, because it's not just a matter of hiring them and staffing it, it's a matter of keeping those people on, is creating the right culture. Now this is what you're seeing here on this picture. This is the very first day that we opened up our new office location in Sarasota, Florida, about a year and a half ago. And you know, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that if you want to create the right culture, what you need to do is you need to get staff buy-in in the entire process. It's important to make people feel like they are part of the company, not that they are just there as an employee. And so what we decided to do was, in moving in the new location, this is their new home. They're going to spend a lot of time in this office. We allowed them to pick out the colors on the walls. We allowed them to pick out the carpet. We allowed them to decorate it. If you see behind the one woman on the right-hand side, there's a handprint. It's basically a big canvas with everybody that moved in the very first day got to put their handprint on the wall and right underneath it whatever they wanted to. And so this becomes their home. And so it's important to get buy-in, not only in this decoration process, But in the process of creating your scripting or in the process of creating your customer service approach, if you get buy-in from everybody on the team, they can't tell you no because they've participated in putting the whole thing together. We also believe in incentivizing them for doing a good job. We have the Stellar Call of the Week, and basically what we do, we have some vending machines in our kitchen area. We're handing out what we call OptiBucks. And every week we're pulling phone calls and we're giving people OptiBucks. We give them free gym memberships and we'll pay for their gym membership if they meet certain criteria. There's a whole bunch of different things that we're looking to do to enhance the overall experience of working in our organization. We give them titles because titles, even though you can say a title is just a title, if somebody has a title, it makes them feel like they have more than a job, like they've got something going on that is important, which is true. So it's important to not just put them in as an employee. It's important to create a whole process around making sure you've got the right people on and keeping them on. So let's talk a little bit about, we're going to kind of segue here into phone calls and scripting and whatnot. If a telephone call comes in from any one of these different sources, whether it's an existing patient, whether it's a vendor rep, if I happen to call one of your practices to talk to your doctor, or if it's a family member or a pizza delivery person or FedEx delivery person or even a wrong number, who would you think is the consumer in this entire group? And the bottom line is everyone is a consumer. It doesn't matter who is calling your phone, even if it is a wrong number. Dylan, are you going to switch the slide there?
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone is a consumer. First impressions will tell that incoming caller so much about your practice, who you are, how knowledgeable you are. Do you care? Will you be taken care of? Should they come into your practice? And if it's an existing patient, should they even stay within your practice? And I know that we've all on the phone have experienced at one point in our lives, whether it be a doctor's office or somebody who's providing a service to us at some level, where we've made a phone call and we go, I don't know why I do business with them. Unless you're forced to, and it's your cable company and there's no other options, and you know, if you just have to accept their poor customer service, there are options and there are choices. And the bottom line is, if you don't take care of your patients, somebody else will be more than happy to take care of them for you. So let's talk about creating a phone plan with that customer service mindset in mind. So I'm going to give you some tips that we've come up with for better phone conversions. One of the very first things is capturing a lead. A lead is a very easy thing to do, and here's one of the biggest challenges that practices have today is quantifying how many people actually call in and what happens with them. If somebody books an appointment, obviously you know that's a phone call that called in and somebody converted to an appointment. But the question is, what happens with people that don't book? Are they even counted? Some practices will count them if they get a name or if the person requests information, but if the person just simply asks price and gets off the phone because they think it's too expensive, they don't even count that phone call, and that's wrong. You need to count everyone and capture a lead routinely, even if you have just a first name, because you want to know where all those calls are coming from. Number two, you want to ensure that these calls follow a format. And what I mean by following a format is some sort of scripting that allows each staff member to be able to know what to do when. Now, I'm not talking about a level of scripting that's so detailed that they sound like they're reading over the phone, but it is a process in scripting, particularly around the most frequently asked questions. You want to assign the informed and well-educated counselors, the best people. Put your A team on these phone calls. And if the A team can't handle them, try to figure out a plan so that these folks are not being missed and going to somebody who should not be handling those phone calls. The next bullet point is to script your phone calls in advance and make sure that you have a predictable outcome for each question. So pricing questions or process questions or whatever it may be. Even when it comes down to the greeting, we should all be consistent. If we learned this in our own listening to our phone calls, once we got a phone system that was sophisticated enough that we could record our calls and go back and listen, we thought our staff members were doing a great job when we were in earshot and we could hear one side of the conversation. Until we could hear both sides, we didn't realize that everybody wasn't doing things the same. And that's why scripting is so important. Ensure your staff is kind and correct. There is no, well, correct is something that, you know, everybody's going to make mistakes. We'll talk about that in a second, but kind, it couldn't be more important. There is no room for attitudes on phone calls whatsoever. If we happen upon a phone call in our organization where somebody has any tone or attitude, which is zero tolerance, they're gone that day. We will not let them continue. Doesn't matter how long they've been with us, tone and attitude is not permitted. Call your own office as a patient and see what they sound like. I do this a lot of times. I'll pick up our phone numbers for our different practices and call through and see if they answer and how they answer and how long it takes them to answer, and see if it sounds like they actually have a smile on their face. And it's fun to do that, and it's fun to see who's on the other end and you know, try to determine whether they're having a good day or not. So next bullet point there. Research a competition, improve upon their style. We all know somebody within our own regions that we think is doing a really good job, or we've heard of a practice that's doing a really good job. Mystery shop them. See how they're doing. See how they sound. If you can actually have somebody go in and do a mystery shop in person and see what their process is, try to find what you like and improve upon their style. And allow your staff to answer these calls uninterrupted. If we went back to the very beginning of how many people are placed on hold during their business day, it's amazing. And remember, these people are not patients of our practice for the most part yet, unless they're a repeat customer coming back. They're new callers coming in, and they have an option to call us and come into us, or they can go someplace else. So try to do your best to make sure that those calls are uninterrupted. And prepare that we are going to make mistakes. We're all human. We at OptiCall will make mistakes every single day. All we can do is learn from those mistakes and try to get better at them. And try to maintain, that was just the other piece of that bullet point. So let's go into the anatomy of, that's okay. We'll go into the anatomy of a phone call. I'm going to let you take over this point, and I'll kind of interject here, Dylan, as we go along.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think you did a great job there. So as far as the anatomy of the phone call, from the over 2 million phone calls that we've taken, we've developed a system that we call logical progression. And that's what we consider the proper flow on these phone calls. So like Bill mentioned earlier, we don't want everybody to sound like robots, but we want to make sure that they're hitting the key points on the phone calls to maximize these opportunities and to create an exceptional experience from the first point of contact. So we break it down into 4 parts. It's the introduction, the exploration, learning about the caller's needs, education, and closing. And we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper and actually go through some of the scripting here. But I guess before you even get to that point, we talked a lot about customer service mindset, having the right buy-in, but even having that smile on the phone call really comes through on the phones, that somebody can almost hear it through your voice. We call that the verbal handshake. So that's probably a big part of getting the phone call started. So as far as the greeting, it has 3 parts, and that's thank you for calling, the name of the practice. This is whatever your name is. This is Dylan. How may I help you? And it's important that everybody has the same buy-in. We get different results on the mystery shops that we do, from thank you for calling, the practice name, or just the practice name. This is Dylan. They don't ask that, how may I help you? So those little things make a big difference. And it's important that these callers feel like they've called the right place. And we've got a stat there from some of the mystery shops that we've done that only 58% of practices actually have a proper greeting, which really seems quite basic.
By the way, Dylan, that out, so you know, that statistic is off of about 1,500 phone calls placed.
Okay, that's helpful. And we follow up from that greeting with, really, regardless of whatever their question is, we want to disarm them, and we want to keep it positive. So we follow up with, great, I can help you with that. And then we'll ask for their name, and we might ask how you're doing today. We found in that survey of the 1,500 calls that only less than 4% of practices are actually asking for the name at the beginning of the call. When we place mystery shops, that's something that's missing on quite a few mystery shops that we do. And we'll ask for a number in case we get disconnected. And we find that that's not too intrusive, that for anybody that's ever been on hold with a large corporation and had to retell their story multiple times, I think they would actually appreciate that. I know I do. And we don't just go into information capture mode. I've heard that on mystery shops as well, where if somebody calls about, say, LASIK, the person on the phone just starts asking for information and trying to book that appointment, that they really haven't built the rapport yet, where we just ask for a name and number at the beginning, and then we're going to get into the next steps as far as the exploration and the education. But we want to give a great first impression. If you use their name, we've got I don't know if any of you have ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, but he says somebody's name is their favorite word. So we're just trying to build some rapport. Obviously, you don't want to overuse it, but little things can make a big difference. We want to find out how they heard about us. So we'll ask if they're a patient of ours already. We show there are only 7% of practices on the phone calls that we reviewed are actually asking that information. And it's kind of a buffer to ask if they're a patient of yours already. It's a good setup to ask for the referral source and ask how you heard about us. And starts to build the rapport, and it helps from a marketing standpoint, so you know which marketing sources are actually generating new business or new phone calls. So as far as the exploration, this is just learning a little bit more about the caller and the procedure that they're interested in. So we might ask about the procedure, what are your goals? Or maybe if it was LASIK, we might ask what kind of challenges that they're having with their vision. You can see here only 50.
For just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think
absolutely
one of the most important pieces of the whole exploration phase is that our goal for the phone call is to create rapport. We're trying to create, if we go back to that one slide that says you don't have to go back, but I'll just reference it. You need to have an excellent product delivery system and customer service mindset. And customer service mindset is about creating a relationship with this person. And so how many times within a phone call are you trying to create that personal connection? So the key in scripting is not necessarily the words in the script. It's having those questions, but allowing your team, they need to ask them, but they can use any verbiage that they want. You do not want them to sound like they're going through the motions and like they are simply filling in a form. We've heard that before too. When you sound like you're trying to fulfill your agenda on the phone call, the personal connection is lost. So it's a balance between creating this script and creating the personal connection that you're looking at creating so that you're making price irrelevant and making them want to come into you.
Agreed. The other thing mentioned there, sorry, I had a call coming off my other line, is the push versus pull method. That's another thing that we see when we mystery shop practices, that you get responses across the board. Sometimes the coordinator or the counselor on the phone feels like they're helping if they're answering all the questions. Depending on when you catch them, they might tell you everything that they know about that particular procedure. So this exploration stage is important as far as keeping that conversation balanced to where you're learning about the caller. And we'll talk about our goals here in a little bit as far as the outcome of the phone calls. But you don't necessarily want to sell your procedure or service over the phone. Our focus is on creating an exceptional experience and selling the next step. I just wanted to touch on that. And one of the things that comes up a lot is how to handle price, that some practices aren't comfortable sharing that information over the phone. But from what we found with all of our practices, it's important to, I want to say, be transparent, but you really can't avoid that question on the phone, or they might lose trust. They might feel like they can go somewhere else where they will give them a price. Now, we do understand that some people will ask this question at the beginning of the call because they don't know how else to differentiate your practice. So having a roadmap, like we talked about, as far as this logical progression, and asking them a little bit of information about themselves or what their goals are, will help lead into how to handle this price question. But it's important that practices have that answer pre-scripted, whether it's a range or a specific price. I would encourage you to take some time to think about how your company wants to answer the price question. And an example might be we charge between $2,000 to $4,000 based on the technology that's best suited for you. And your next step would be to come in for a consultation to see what technology is best suited for you. Another question that we've added, this is another pearl that we got from Mark Babbitt at Care Credit, is kind of turning that back onto the caller, asking if that's about what they were expecting. And that helps identify if cost is an issue. And if it is, it's also important to have your validation statements pre-scripted, or whether it's a validation
Dylan,
about including post-operative care. Go ahead.
I can tell you, I have actually used that question personally. I still will log into our phones at OptiCall from time to time, because if I don't log into the phones and take a phone call and hear what people are saying and doing on the phones, I can't help instruct our team on how to do a better job. And so when I heard this concept from Mark about, is that about what you're expecting? At the very beginning, I'm thinking, well, gosh, it sounds a little bit corny. I'm not sure I can ask that or say it in a way that makes it flow comfortably. And so I decided to try it on my own before I mentioned it to any of our staff. And I did. And in actuality, when I did that, it was pretty neat to see the response, because people would say, oh, yeah, that's about what I heard it was going to be. Great. I don't have to go any further than that. But then they said, well, that's higher than what I thought it was going to be. You know, my friend had it done for $3,000 or whatever it was that they said. Then it allowed me to focus on those value statements. Well, yeah, I can definitely understand there will be places that will be cheaper than us. You know, one of the things to understand is that our surgeons involved in all steps of the process has been doing this for well over 20 years and has done 20,000 procedures. So, you know, you're in great hands with us. It's that idea of painting a value statement or creating those value statements that every one of your team members knows, particularly if price is an objection. They need to know why you're different.
I agree. And they want to know that they're getting a good value, ultimately. They don't necessarily want the cheapest. They don't necessarily want the most expensive. But they want to know that they called the right place. And that's why it's important to have those validations prepared before that call comes in. So think about what's distinctive about your practice, not just we're number one in the region. What makes you number one? How many procedures have you done, or maybe what kind of technology you're using, or if you've received any awards locally that are distinctive or quantitative. Those are all helpful to let people know that they're in good hands with your practice. And asking them if that's about what they're expecting, it kind of leads into this next step, which is the education. And I like to think of this as the under-promise and over-deliver step, where you want to talk about the next step, where on the mystery shops, again, when we do the mystery shops, we hear people mention a consultation, but they don't actually talk about what that consists of, and they don't typically invite them in. So be proactive, ask them if they've ever been in to see if they're a candidate for the procedure, and then let them know what those next steps are. Is there a cost associated, who they get to meet with, how long they may be there, any expectations you might want them to have after the consultation. Because the worst case scenario is if somebody thinks that they can come in on their lunch break and they might get an opportunity to meet with your surgeon and be out of there within 30 minutes, if those expectations aren't met, it's not really a good use of either party's time. So it's important to talk about that next step.
Before you go on here, I think I want one point I want to make sure that everybody understands. The whole concept of education is not to educate that incoming caller about everything that you know about the procedure and the process and post-op and all of those things. It's, as you had referenced a little bit earlier, Dylan, it's sell the consultation, not the procedure. So when we talk about education, it's really educating them on, if they had a price question, you're answering those questions. And if you're telling them about what the first step is, you're educating them on the process, but not giving them so much information that they just get off the phone, because you've given them everything. they have no reason to come into your office.
Absolutely. And a pretty important part to this phone call is actually inviting them in, where we give a couple different examples where you can take an assumptive approach, or you can ask them if we can look at the calendar to see when you can get them in. But back to what we were saying with those mystery shops, that people talk about the consultation, but they don't actually invite them in. And I don't know if that's a fear of rejection or a lack of training. But these calls, especially when you're talking about an elective surgery procedure, you're talking about thousands of dollars of revenue that these calls represent. And it's just really important to maximize the opportunities. And asking them for the appointment is a very important part of the phone call. You have anything you want to add to that, Bill?
Well, I think you're right on. The important thing to understand is that if you just simply miss one opportunity a week and it's a $4,000 procedure, you're missing over a couple $100,000 a year. And what I hear when I hear the mystery shops and even real patient phone calls is I hear somebody say, hey, we do offer a free consultation, but they're waiting for the incoming caller to invite themselves in. So you don't want to wait for that, because what ends up happening is they don't necessarily invite themselves in. Unless they were calling to book an appointment, then you basically educated them, you told them you have a free consult, and they'll say, well, I'll give you a call back. So that's why it's important to follow the process all the way through. It's not waiting for them to invite themselves in after you tell them what's available.
Definitely. And we might have mentioned this earlier, but we've got two goals on our phone calls. And our first goal is booking that appointment, that's the best outcome that we can have to sell the next step. Not, like we said before, not selling the procedure over the phone. And if they're not ready to book, that doesn't mean that they're a lost lead. We would encourage you to offer to send out some kind of information. And this gives you the opportunity to capture the contact information so you can start to follow up and cultivate those leads. I don't know what you do internally as far as your marketing goes, but things like newsletters, online webinars, seminars, there's a lot of different ways to try to bring your prospective patients along the educational spectrum.
It's funny that, when you take a look at this whole concept of capturing the lead that the patient doesn't book, I've heard this happen on phone calls where the counselor will say to somebody, they don't get a commitment for an appointment, and they say, well, do you mind if I get your phone number and I can give you a call back in a week or two? And I can tell you, 99 times out of 100, I will hear the caller say, no, that's okay, I'll call you back. At that point, they're lost. You have somebody that called in, and they're not going to take any next step, and now you don't have any opportunity to capture any additional information on that lead. So to take a different tact on that, to offer them out something, they don't realize what you're doing is you're actually capturing their lead through the process of getting their name and their email address and their mailing address or whatever it is. So that's why it's better to do this and offer them something that they will receive, and you'll find it much easier to get them.
Right, and it should serve two purposes. Hopefully the practice has some nice collateral material that helps the practice stand out. But the other thing I was going to mention in regards to our mystery shopping is this is a key part here, that if somebody doesn't make that extra effort to capture the caller's information by offering to send out information, that determines whether we score the call as a lost lead or not. So I think it's pretty significant that this is really geared for the people that are not now buyers, that are still doing their research. And if you're the ones that educate them, I think they'll choose you regardless of price. So it's important to maximize these opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And here's one of the biggest challenges too. When you talk about the whole concept of a phone plan, Dylan, it doesn't just stop at the initial phone call. It's creating some sort of a follow-up plan to mine those active leads. When you take a look at, let's say, 100 patients inquire, and maybe you have the ability to convert 75% of those into consultations. Some practices might do better, some practices may not do as good. but let's just use the number 75%. Well, you have an additional 25% of people who inquired. You did something to get them to raise their hand. They actually made a phone call into your office. So there's some level of interest there. Creating a follow-up plan to mine those leads will get an additional 10 to 15% of them to commit to an appointment. So it is absolutely worth the effort. You've spent the money to make the phone ring. They've called you, and having some sort of follow-up plan, it makes all the sense in the world. Bring up this next slide because I find these statistics absolutely amazing. When you look at the persistency of response, and this comes out of one of the studies that we can send to anybody who's interested after the presentation, the total average number of responses, all types, phone calls or emails, to any inquiry was only 2.2 times did they try to reach somebody. The average number of phone calls made back to a new lead was 1. That's it. They tried 1 time, and that's no more after that. The average number of emails sent to the new lead, less than 1. And the number of, or percentage of companies that never even responded to the leads in the first place was over 51%. It's absolutely outstanding. It's crazy. It's ludicrous to think that this is what's happening, and we're spending so much money to get these people to inquire in the first place, and we're not even taking care of them when they do inquire and making sure that we're doing everything to try to get them into our practices.
That's just a link to the actual study there, Bill. So we'll be posting these slides on our SlideShare account and distributing the slides after the presentation today, so you guys can click on that if you want to learn a little bit more about the study.
This is the original study. We have the follow-up in a PDF, though, that we can email out.
Gotcha. So this is something that we threw in, just that training doesn't stop after our initial period, that there's ongoing training internally with OptiCall. We posted a couple books that Bill and I are fans of. We recently attended AMO University in San Francisco at the ASCRS convention and heard a motivational speaker, and I really liked this saying about be great at who you are and you become awesome at what you do. So we really encourage our staff to, I don't know what the right word is, to kind of dive into self-improvement, find ways to be happy both at work and outside of work. And these are just a couple books that I'm a big advocate of.
It's educating yourself too, and it's having an interest in doing it. That's what we were talking about earlier. Hire the people that have that buy-in. One of the things you can have them do is just simply Google customer service videos, customer service, great customer service. Pull up some articles and have them look up things, and it's really neat to have the internet and everything that we can do with it today, and you can pull so much great information from that. So, Dylan, we're getting close to the end here, so I want to leave a little bit of time for questions that anybody might have.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just jumped ahead. The last thing was, we're almost done here. So results and monitoring, this is the system we use internally. We actually have a web-based roadmap that our counselors follow to ensure this consistency. So that's two of the biggest things about the phone handling is the customer service mindset and the consistency. The results in monitoring, we're able to do that because of the roadmap that we have internally, where we can see how many calls are coming in, how our individual employees are doing on conversions, how our clients are doing with their conversions, and we can really kind of fine-tune where the opportunities lie. But it's important to have a system to be able to monitor your results as you go. Otherwise, it's hard to evaluate what's happening with those new opportunities that are coming to your practice. We got one more poll here, and then we'll wrap up. But the last poll is asking if you've ever mystery shopped your own practice. Go ahead and watch that. And we're about to wrap it up with an opportunity for you guys to be able to do a complimentary mystery shop on your own practice. To get the majority of the people that have voted here, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and launch the results. Oops. Looks like more people are joining in. Okay, so 31% of our audience has done a mystery shop, and 62% no, 7% not sure. Are you able to see those results, Bill, on your screen?
Sure can. Yep.
Okay. We'll just get to the last. So this question here is, do you have a way to review calls internally? I know we mentioned our ACE program at the beginning. It stands for Actual Consumer Experience, where we record real calls.
You need to move to the next slide. You need to move to the next slide.
Okay.
Still has a poll up.
Oh, the poll's up. I'm sorry. I forgot to hide the results. Let me go back. I like the picture on this last slide here. So thanks for letting me know, Bill. Do you have a way to review calls internally? Do you have recorded calls? I know some people do pay-per-click advertising. Sometimes that comes with a recorded 800 number. But it's important to evaluate what's actually happening on your new calls that are coming in, because if you can't measure, how can you manage? And this is kind of a screenshot of what our mystery shop link looks like that we put together for practices. It is a $350 value, and if you're interested in taking advantage of this opportunity, just fill out the survey that should pop up as you exit today's presentation. And this is the final slide that has my information and Bill's information, if there's anything that we can help you with. We're pretty active on social media. We have a Facebook page. We try to share our presentations on SlideShare and stay in communication through Twitter as well. But we'll stick around here for a little bit if you guys have any questions. We had a couple come up during the presentation. Somebody asked if we ever mystery shop OptiCall, Bill.
Well, you know, the funny thing is we don't have to mystery shop OptiCall because we have the real calls that we listen in on. We've got 4 or 5 people every single week that pull the real call and review it. And so we are constantly listening in on our own phone calls to make sure they're doing the right thing. If you have the real deal, it's a lot better than a painted scenario. And if you do mystery shop, I think the thing that's very important, when we mystery shop, we've been mystery shopped and we hear the phone calls and it's a matter of trying to play stump the counselor, and that's not the goal of the mystery shop. The goal of the mystery shop is to see, is there an attempt to build rapport? Is there some sort of attempt to make a phone call more than just a price question and get off the phone? And so, you know, we have the opportunity to listen to the real deal, and I think that's even more impactful than having a mystery shop. So if you can do that, and you want us to review real calls for you, and you have a few real calls you want to send me, I've had practices do that, and we've come up with some pretty interesting results.
We've got more of a suggestion than a question. One of the attendees said that during the scripting, rather than saying I can help you, or rather than saying can I help you on the greeting, they're saying I can help you.
You know,
the value in that.
Say that. I actually have I've bought 3 Volkswagens from a Volkswagen dealer in Florida over the past 2 years, and the gentleman who has sold me all of them picks up the phone and says, "Hi, this is Daryl. I can help." So it's interesting that you say that, and it's a different approach on the concept, and I like it.
Yeah, it kind of falls in line with what we say after that greeting with, "Great, I can help you with that." I guess it's just taking it a step before. That might be something that would be worth trying with some of our phone calls. Looks like, okay, here's, how do we handle an angry patient?
That's a really good question. Well, first thing, if you have that angry patient call recorded, I'm going to go back to an earlier part in our presentation, save it, because you want your new staff that you're hiring in to use that as a training experience and allow them to hear it and say, stop the call and say, what would you do here? Stop the call again. What would you do here? Allow them to hear what happens with patients. And what's going to happen with an angry caller is going to be completely dependent on the person who's picking up the phone. If you have somebody who's picking up the phone that has that customer service mindset, they're going to be proactive in apologizing, even if they didn't make a mistake in the first place, and trying to understand what that incoming caller's challenges are. They're going to have a notepad right on the side of their desk, and they're going to jot down notes as to what it is that they're hearing from that person, so that when they try to help them, they're going to be able to reference their notes and not have to ask that person a question about what the situation was again. So it's all about taking a proactive approach in customer service to begin with, and if that angry call comes through, you're poised to take it right from the beginning. When I was taking phone calls all the time, I would look at an angry caller as an opportunity, as a challenge. It was my goal to have that person turned around by the end of this conversation and have them happy. And I can tell you, out of all of the phone calls I've taken, literally thousands and thousands and thousands of phone calls personally, I only had one that I was unable to do that with. So you need to have people with the right approach that look at this, that I'm not going to mirror this energy. I'm going to absorb this energy. I'm going to see what I can do to find out what their problems are and do my best to help.
I like that. So you're addressing it. You're not making it worse. We've got a couple more questions, Bill. One's about how many calls/emails should you do to follow up on a lead?
That's a really good question. A lot of that stuff is in the MIT follow-up study, and like I said, we're more than happy to do that. My suggestion is you really want to, the first initial approach to somebody, if they're emailing in, is you want to try to get in touch with them literally first 5 or 10 minutes after that email comes through. Now, sometimes you just don't have the ability to do that, but you will have your best results in that time frame. And if you don't reach them, the suggestion is, let's say you make a phone call to them, and make a phone call. If you have a phone number, don't just email them back. Make a phone call to them and try to reach them. If you get their voicemail, send them an email. Let them know that you tried to reach them and you got their voicemail. In this day and age, with all the iPhones and the Android phones and all the phones and connectivity that we have, we get these emails right on our phone that we see that number that was coming through on our caller ID that we didn't recognize was actually the doctor's office calling us. Okay, now the email let me call them right back. So you will have your best results by doing the phone call, email if you don't reach them right away, and then follow up. I would suggest at least twice within that week if they're not responding. If they're not, then you can start to stretch out your follow-up more. But there is a point where you're going to start to annoy somebody if they're not responding at all. So especially if you're trying to do it via phone and email. So I would say in the first couple of weeks, if you're doing more than 4 or 5 times and trying to reach out, then put them on an email list of newsletters or information you've got going out. When they're ready, they'll re-inquire.
I was going to say something to that effect, that it's not how many times you respond, as much as it is how quickly you respond. And I'm a big advocate of the Sandler sales training, and a lot of that is kind of revolves around agreements. So if you're meeting your end of the agreement and you're following through, and the prospect isn't meeting you in the middle, then I like what you said, Bill. At some point, maybe you schedule a follow-up 6 months out. Hopefully you have a good contact management system that allows you to do follow-ups, but maybe schedule them for a phone call sometime.
Well, I can tell you, I've signed up for on websites for information just to see what happens, and I still, years later, I will get a newsletter every 2 to 4 weeks from some practices, and it's not something that I feel that I'm being intruded on, or it's okay. I would say, once you get beyond that initial stage, I wouldn't wait 6 months to respond again. I might wait, beyond 2 weeks, go to another 2 weeks, and then stretch it out to once a month in some sort of a fashion in trying to reach out. But
we've got a couple more questions here, Bill. I don't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead. That's okay.
We've kind of gone over here. One question is about how do you handle sales calls? We talked about everybody being a potential consumer. Do you have any good suggestions on how to deal with those?
Well, I mean, yeah, we get a lot of marketing calls for our practices, somebody calling through and wants to do advertising for them or whatever it may be. And, you know, all we can do is do what our practices tell us to do, which is put them into this extension in a voicemail or whatever it may be. My suggestion is make them feel special too. Take some information down from them. What company are you calling from? And, you know, especially if the other person is available. Let me take some notes down, and I'll make sure that I get them a message. You know, something like that makes them feel special, and not just that you're the gatekeeper blowing them off.
Right, that you're willing to help. That it's that customer service mindset and being friendly is important. One more question here. If the phone's ringing off the hook with 3 lines tied up, what do you say to the caller?
Well, first off, if you've got the phone ringing off the hook and 3 lines tied up, you're going to want to take a look at hiring somebody else in. The one thing that you need to keep in mind is that there's a balance between being, you know, so busy on the phones that you're providing poor customer service and bringing people in, hiring enough people. You really have to strike that balance. Obviously, you don't want to overhire, and now you've got people sitting around doing nothing all day long. But you really want to make sure that you're doing your best to make sure those calls are answered, because these are $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 procedures that people are calling in about. So, and that experience.
I was going to say, we have a whole slide presentation on telephone etiquette on SlideShare, and it addresses that question pretty in depth about, I mean, you do all you can do, which is, in some cases, it may just be picking up on that line, being friendly, asking if they can please hold. Better case scenario would be being able to actually ask for that person's name and number in case you get disconnected. But all of it's about you do what you can and try to be friendly about it, and that, I guess that's all you can do. We got one more question. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
The only thing I want to say is if you're going to put people on hold, this is a little statistic out of one of the things that we have too. 68% of those people will stay online if they hear relevant information. If you've got message on hold that's giving them some details about your office, the procedure you're offering, 68% will stay on hold and listen to that. Only 12% will stay on hold if they hear silence. They'll end up abandoning that phone call much, much sooner. And remember, we go back to 34% of the callers who hang up will not call back. Try to get some sort of messaging on hold if they're on hold and have to be there.
One more question here is, how do you match competitor discounts and avoid losing them to a competitor with a better price?
You don't. Your job is not to, the thing to remember is that regardless of what you do on price, you're not going to be able to compete. If you lower your price, your competition is going to lower their price. You'll never be able to compete on price because everybody's going to keep on going lower and lower, and eventually we're charging so little that it doesn't even make sense to do the procedure. You're also not going to be able to compete on technology because no matter what the newest laser is that you bring into your office or the technology or procedure or whatever it is, once you have it, you have a very limited window on the offering that as being exclusive because somebody else is going to come into your territory and offer the same thing at a lower price point. Your goal is to provide that superior service that they look at this and they go, I'm going to pay more just because of the customer service that I get. And It was a statistic, and I was looking for it before this meeting, and I can't find where I had it, but I remember it saying somewhere in the area of 38% of people that are looking at products will spend more on the same product if they have better customer service with that organization. And that's pretty impactful if you think about it. They'll take the same exact product and actually pay more for it because they got better customer service.
We got one more question. I like your answer there, Bill. Hopefully we can wrap this up. It's kind of back to putting people on hold. Should you ask before you put somebody on hold, or is it inappropriate?
I would absolutely do that. I would absolutely ask for permission and just wait a second and get it. It only takes 2 or 3 more seconds on that phone call, and I know if anybody on this phone call has made a phone call and they pick up and they say, Dr. Jones' office, please hold. That's one of the most annoying things because you just don't, you feel no attachment to that phone call. And I mean, there's been times where I've been placed on hold for so long that I forgot who I called in the first place. So, you know, it's absolutely, if you can take the time to just ask for the permission, Some people will say, no, I can't. And if that is the case, then say, well, you know, we're really busy at the call center right now. If you don't mind and you can't hold, let me take your name and number down, and I'll call you back within the next 10 or 15 minutes. So that should happen very rarely, but asking permission is the polite thing to do.
Great. Well, I appreciate all those that stuck around for the Q&A here, and thanks. You did a great job, Bill. I appreciate everyone's time
thank
today.
you. You did too.
We'll be recording this event and distributing the recording to all those that attended and registered for the presentation. And we look forward to connecting with all of you in the future.
And let me just say thank you, too, from my side. I mean, we spent an extra 15 minutes here, and we still had well more than half of the attendees stay on the phone call, and that means a lot. So it means that people are looking to improve what it is that they're doing. So thanks very much, everybody, and we appreciate talking to you.
All right. Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.